All right. Took me a little bit longer than I would have liked, but here's my take on the Mrbeast response interview, his evidence document, and the now snowballing narrative that Dogpack 404 lied, and the entire saga has been rife with misinformation from the start. Let's get into it. Lightning fast recap. Ex-Mrbeast employee, Dogpack 404, makes huge allegations against the company and Jimmy personally. Another ex-employee tells his own story afterwards, and then more problems arise all over the place as everyone jumps on board. It becomes an internet trend to weigh in on the drama, give opinions, and dig up more, until, more recently, a YouTuber named Soggy Cereal does a lengthy video debunking some of the initial claims, doing the whole inverse contrarian criticize the critic angle, which is always juicy, with some good information and a fresh perspective. That video becomes a rallying cry for those trying to defend Mrbeast, and right after, Jimmy goes on a long interview with Oompaville, which is what I'm evaluating right now in this video, to try and clear his name. That interview is pretty much garbage and does very little to help him, despite being a softball puff piece, but I'm going to go point by point now through what I consider to be the most important parts, because that's what everyone's doing, and I'm going to do it too. So enjoy. First major point, and the thing that set the tone for me right off the bat, is his asinine take on censorship. He complains heavily about Reddit moderators and the fact that things speaking good about him were sometimes deleted off of the site, which is absolutely hilarious coming from him, because in the very brief amount of time that my personal source was archiving all of his channels, we discovered that Mrbeast YouTube, right, like the company Mrbeast and his channel, was deleting tens of thousands of YouTube comments. Much more than that by now, actually. That was just this short window where we were archiving it. Blanket banning keywords and retroactively cutting out dozens of pieces of his videos, which looked bad or showcased certain artwork in their living room. I won't explain what that artwork is because it's not necessary right now, but the point is, Mrbeast's own channel and company censored more content than Reddit ever could on the subject, and it's not even close. I have 2 entire videos about this particular angle, the cover-up, if you will, but suffice it to say, the idea that deleting things would be something that annoys Jimmy is pure fucking comedy. Great start, but it's only up from there. They quickly move on to discussing why his own mother was the head of human resources, which is obviously incredibly stupid. However, he gives an actual answer here that should be considered. His company grew fast, he asked her to do it, it was stupid at the time, and then things rapidly expanded, so he knows it was an issue, it's been rectified, and it was a product of a fledgling business owned and operated by a teenage creator. Being objectively fair here, that's not a bad response, nor should he be canceled for it, really. Next, they discuss the no means no policy that was in the leaked document. It's not really a policy, but the thing that he wrote for his company, to which Jimmy's response is essentially, it's fine, the context makes it fine. But no, it's not fine. That's still a bad policy with bad wording that fosters unhealthy interactions with all sorts of people for all sorts of reasons. Businesses, external partners especially, you name it. Do better. That's still bad. Don't downplay it. Not a strong start. Next point that jumped out at me was the do you use CGI portion of the video, and this is really truly such a worthless line of questioning. He obviously spices up the videos with CGI, that's just objectively true, which you may or may not interpret as manipulative for the audience, fine, whatever. But why aren't we talking about direct influence and interference in monetary challenges that can have a material impact on the outcome? If that's written right into the contracts and everyone involved understands, from the participants all the way to the audience, that no matter what they do in a given competition, Jimmy might just rig it at the end with an unfair advantage for or against any other competitor at his sole discretion, fine. But you need to be open now about the reality of what you do, and what you do is just objectively not fair competition. So far, I was getting a bad feeling from the interview. Seems like a hollow attempt at sanitizing PR, but then we get to the hospital thing, erasing a section of a hospital in one of his videos with CGI. He calls it just a dumb mistake. Silly, brushing it off as hard as possible. But that's his job, to be fair, so this is understandable. He says things like, as legit as it gets, except one little editing mistake, or now I sound like I'm downplaying it, which is funny because he is downplaying it. That's the point of this whole thing. Now on to the boys versus girls video and whether or not they use their own employees in the competition. The word competition here is obviously a joke because he did several things like removing a key competitor on the boys team at a key time, which can absolutely impact the outcome of a monetary challenge. His explanation for the employee side was COVID, that's why we did it, but no one cares. He directly influenced the challenge with advantages and manipulations that can easily affect outcome. That is rigging. Even if it fails, giving one team a material advantage in a competition is an attempt to rig it. No one cares about the "I only had my employees in because of COVID" excuse. Talk about stuff that matters, bro. Next is a segment about the video done by Soggy Cereal. Jimmy acts like Soggy Cereal went hard on him, which is absolutely not the case whatsoever. Soggy went hard against Dogpack 404 because that was the entire premise and mission for his upload. However, there's a really good observation by Oompaville here, where he says he's not defending you, he's just disproving Dogpack, which is a very good thing for everyone to be aware of. That didn't stop Jimmy from trying to use it that way, commenting on it or messaging the video to other people. And they briefly go over the fact that Jimmy's reaction to this debunking video against his biggest critic was so poor, Soggy had to come out with an entire thread about it. But overall, the section isn't that exciting. Moving on, we arrive at the illegal lotteries, with a very interesting statement by Jimmy. When asked the question, "Do you think you ran illegal lotteries?" Can you guess his reply? That's right. Quote, "I don't think we did." Shocker. But then he says, "They have people looking into it trying to pull the footage." Yeah, pull the footage offline, you mean, like you did for the 5 hours on Facebook and 2 videos that were previously unlisted but still available on the Mrbeast 3 separate YouTube channel. One titled, "If You Buy This Shirt, I'll Sign It," and the other, "Buy This Before It's Too Late." If looking into it is deleting whatever evidence of it that you can find online and hiding it from the public eye, then yes, congratulations, Jimmy, you're looking into it. He continues on, I shit you not, to say that he's trying to dig up all the footage of that live stream, later even going so far as to state, "I just don't have the footage from them," which is a lie. Yes, he does. And if he doesn't, it's because he deleted it after the allegations were made. The common vernacular word for that type of thing is cover-up. You have to be kidding me with this. Ultimately, he gives a refund, which is good, by the way, that's what he always should have done, to anyone who wants it. But this part of the interview massively harms his credibility in my eyes. Great to see that the people who were a victim of his illegal lotteries are getting a refund. Bad to see him being this deceptive, shamelessly, as if no one will catch it. Then we get to the crypto stuff. However, the answers given here are anything but valuable. Straight up, it's just him saying, "I wasn't managing anything," but he's so deeply involved, this is a really embarrassing cop-out. He says, "I don't want to fuck with this stuff," or something like that, but he openly talks about doing things like bulk buying NFTs personally on other podcasts, and everyone should go watch CoffeeZilla's video to draw their own conclusions. It's very, very good, by the way, and lays everything out in like a super understandable way. But yeah, it's a terrible answer. Zero credibility or sincerity, at least in my opinion. "I wasn't managing anything." Dude, you were dictating, you were literally telling the fund, "Go buy this," and then they would. How is that not managing anything? After that, we get a bunch of jokes about stuff that doesn't matter until he says, "I want someone to deep dive on our charity books," insinuating that there's nothing to see and it would clear his name, while also saying that he's offered or tried to get people to do it, but they won't. Yeah, dude, they'll see what you give them to see. There is literally zero chance that you would ever give them documents that show illegal behavior if it did exist, making this the emptiest possible thing that he could ever say to try and make himself look better. It's a farce of an answer, and it should be called out for what it is, which is a waste of everyone's time. This is an issue that has always existed. It's not unique to Jimmy, Mrbeast, or anything like that, and it will always exist, right? To be clear. No one trying to prove their innocence will hand over proof of their own crimes voluntarily. To act like this isn't the case is really just sad. The YouTubers who decline to do this for him, as he puts it, aren't declining because they're deceptive or biased. They're declining because they know it's a worthless PR stunt that cannot benefit anyone, least of all them. Actually, it would benefit Jimmy and only Jimmy. And he has a flat 0% chance of having this be a trustworthy process, no matter if anyone did it. It's just a product of how the process is conducted. Full stop. This is a stupid thing to have ever talked about. Then came a section about the eye surgery video having charities unpaid, but I'll keep it brief here. I never focused on this ever because it's one of the things that bogs down the legitimate criticism. Not delving into it then, still not delving into it now. After that, we get to the Team C's problem, criticism saying things like, you only remove the equivalent of 10 hours of trash pollution from the ocean, which is very similar to the point above. Like the eye surgeries, this is another category of criticism that makes no sense and should never have been legitimized or focused on. There are valid and invalid things to highlight about what Mr. Beast has done and continues to do wrong. However, this is definitely not one of the valid ones. He even says, I'm glad we're hitting these at one point. Yes, of course he is, because these are the most easily refuted critical points with the least impact and the lowest value. He should be thrilled that this is what people are talking about because it gives him natural cover against the more serious problems. Soon after, he goes into a monologue of all the best unknown things that he's done off camera. Some of these are legitimately good. I'm not going to pretend they're not. But the credibility of this interview as a hard-hitting way to debunk serious allegations is just completely shot at this point. After that, there's a bunch of I just like helping people style statements, which is more puff piece garbage, PR reputation washing. It is what it is. It's to be expected from someone like him, whose entire professional brand seems to be an amalgamation of how can I get more popular and have people love me personified. Next up is ethical sourcing in the Feastables chocolate supply chain. And surprisingly, okay, like ding, ring the bell, this is a very, very good answer. The explanation he gives is solid. There's receipts, there's plausibility, there's logic here. And if anything, the response he gives more so leaves you questioning, why can't he give legitimate responses to the rest of the things that people care about? Basically, he has what seems to be a very good pipeline for Feastables production that does about as much as anyone could ever be expected to do in order to mitigate abuse or unfair practices in the worker chain. And he gives explicit examples of what those companies are, how the policies work, and therefore why concern over labor practices is genuinely unfounded. I know the internet is relatively split right now, and a lot of people don't want to hear anything positive about Mr. Beast whatsoever, but this was a good response with legitimate points that should be referenced by critics like me. Like, you can't gloss over this one. It not only needs to be said, it needs to be emphasized. After that, there's an entire section on mold in Feastables, which again is a line of criticism that detracts from the things that matter. It gives him a perfect opportunity to yap and yap about how wrong the critics are, and the fact that the Lunchly controversy even exists in the first place is a net negative for the prospect of YouTube's golden boy ever having to face the music for the real things that he's done wrong. If you criticize 100 different things and 90 of them are useless garbage, it's very easy for the target of that criticism to get away from the 10 things that do matter by pointing at the 90 things that don't. I don't know if I've ever seen a more perfect example of that happening in real time on social media than this. He even goes off on a giant tangent about how the next Feastables product they're launching is great. What is this, a promo? He should be facing scrutiny over mass deletion of evidence, illegal lotteries, manipulating competition outcomes, worker misconduct, injuries, malpractice, abuse, all that stuff, right? Like, what is this? Next, we get to the explanation about Delaware, a registered sex offender who was working in the video production part of the Mrbeast empire. And this is where it just gets, I don't even really know what to call it. I already said it was sad, so what's worse than sad? Depressing. He claims he hired the guy from Best Buy and he never knew, but let's break it down. After he was hired and after he appeared unmasked in a video as a Best Buy employee with the name tag Delaware, he then goes on to do a separate video sometime later with a physical mask on under the alias Zorro. Why? People at this company, they knew. Period. They knew. I won't sit here and tell you that Jimmy knew, right? I'm not going to make a definitive statement like that. But when Jimmy is appearing in a video alongside his own employee who is now wearing a mask and going by a second layer alias because Delaware isn't even his real name to begin with, and now he's got a mask on as they call him Zorro, you cannot possibly expect anyone to believe that you didn't question why you were concealing this guy's identity through multiple layers in your massively viral public video, especially when the normative baseline of this entire company is just point blank clout chasing. Either A, Jimmy is lying, or B, he's an idiot who didn't even get to the bottom of why his own employee was so concerned about being in a video in the first place, despite supposedly appearing publicly in prior videos with his face showing. Remember, that's the whole defense here. Why his employee is now hiding his name and face from the camera. He never asked about it. He never heard any of the explanations that were clearly percolating all throughout his company, and he just had no knowledge of the situation until recently. Yeah, mark that one down as not a chance in hell. And also, to be clear, I don't think Jimmy's an idiot. I think he's actually rather intelligent. Keep in mind, this is the guy who had extremely suspect artwork on his own wall in the pseudo frat house he used to make videos from, and then retroactively pulled all of that footage out of his old videos as soon as the controversy hit, and has stayed deathly silent until now, really, in the aftermath. It's understandable, to be sure, but let's not go thinking this interview is anything other than someone skirting the issues that actually matter. Finally, a while later, they get to a real question again about how to prevent dangerous challenges from happening in the future, similar to the Jake Weddle situation, which for anyone who doesn't know, but most of you probably do know, otherwise you wouldn't be here watching, Jake Weddle was basically in solitary confinement for a challenge on the channel with sleep deprivation and sensory bombardment in a way that is completely unethical and inhumane. I shit you not, his answer is, well, those other people endured the same bad things for the sake of money, so he just reacted badly. Even making sure to say explicitly, didn't go long enough to where we got a video, so we didn't end up uploading it. But bro, didn't go long enough to where we got a video is not the explanation for why that experience was never uploaded publicly to YouTube. They had to send in a psychiatrist who confirmed that the patient, in this case Jake Weddle, was suffering immensely. And we're supposed to listen to this guy yap and yap and yap in this interview like, oh, it didn't go long enough to get a video, that's why we didn't upload. Which is psychotic when you consider the circumstances. He uses all sorts of subtle psychological manipulations, by the way, constantly. Here's an example for people that don't believe me, okay? Here's an example. I'll play it right now.
I'm not trying to just like disavow everything, like, you know what I mean? Like there was one woman who we had, when we were filming, we had obviously tons of feminine care products and stuff like that, but there was one woman who was allergic to the feminine care products, and we didn't have allergen-free ones like tampons and pads, and she told someone, I don't know who she told, I haven't been able to find it, but I mean, I believe that she did, that she was allergic, and they didn't obviously do the logical thing, which is tell us or just drive to the local Walmart and buy some and give it to her. And so she wasn't able to get, you know, feminine care products in a reasonable amount of time, which is unacceptable. And these, like, so I learned a lot of little things like that.
Did you catch that? There was a woman who told someone, I don't know who she told, I haven't been able to find it, but I believe that she did, that she was allergic. And they didn't obviously do the logical thing, which is tell us or just drive to the local Walmart, buy some and give it to her. And so she wasn't able to get feminine care products in a reasonable time, which is unacceptable, end quote. Do you hear it when I emphasize things differently? Simultaneously casting doubt on what she said, I couldn't find it, but I believe her, which necessitates that you now consider, why does he have to just believe her? Why couldn't he find it? And then they didn't obviously do the logical thing, which is tell us, which puts distance between him and the problem, sort of othering this guilty party as them, not us, because they didn't do the logical thing, which is easy, just drive to Walmart. And he uses this kind of tactic throughout the entire interview. Once you catch on to it, it's very obvious. Again, to a degree, this is reflexive, and it's always going to happen when someone feels under the gun or pressured, but Oompaville is so incredibly soft on him, it's very clear to me that this is just his default setting. This is how Mrbeast operates regardless of the context, because Oompa's not even pressing him. He's not hitting him with any difficult subjects or countering when he spins a narrative, which would have made this kind of reply a lot more understandable if he were. Brace yourselves, though, because in the next portion, he actually debunks something. He talks about unions and gives names of the unions his Amazon show has used, which is fantastic. But confusingly, he brushes over it extremely quickly, despite this being one of so far only 2 points that were anything other than useless. The first was Feastable's production chain and ethical practices. Well done with that answer, and the detailed clarity from it. This would be the second time to do that, right? Do the same thing again, except he doesn't. He very quickly moves on. He goes on to say, we called 1,950 contestants, couldn't find a single broken bone, which is oddly specific because the allegations from multiple mainstream media sources, like the New York Times, for example, were about not getting medication properly, people passing out, not receiving adequate food, sustaining many injuries but not explicitly broken bones, which makes me wonder why such a sculpted, empty response is being given. It's like he picked something that he knew didn't happen, even though 500 other bad things happened. It's like, I couldn't find any evidence of this bad thing happening because it didn't happen. It's like, yeah, no shit, bro. The bad thing that you picked because it didn't happen. Go figure. All the other bad things that you're not talking about did, though. But then we get this great little interaction right here.
After like that claim came out, like we literally called 1,950 contestants of the 2,000. We couldn't get a hold of all 2,000. I couldn't find a single broken bone. Yeah, online it's being claimed there's dozens. I mean, there's so much or even disinformation like that being spread. So like, which makes it hard for me to just come out and like talk about things like the pad thing and other things where, you know, we did mess up on little things and there are definitely things we could have done better. But then there's just like, it's mixed in with like all these crazy outrageous claims and it's like.
Did you catch it? Now it's a definitive. We did mess up, referring to the same issue where just a little while before he said, I don't know who she told. I haven't been able to find it, downplaying and distancing himself from it as much as possible. However, now that there's another claim he can focus on, the tons of broken bones claim, which he probably already knows is false and was barely even said. It wasn't even one of the mainstream criticisms that were ever levied against him or Beast Games. Suddenly he's not trying to distance himself from that tiny little thing over there. Now that tiny little thing over there is the way by which he distances himself from this new thing. If you pay attention, it's an adept lesson in manipulation. Not a masterclass, mind you. Maybe he's off his game a little bit. An adept class. After that is a big chunk of time about how he gave everyone that competed $2,000. Look at me, so generous. Oh my gosh, I'm amazing. I give people money, blah, blah, blah. Same stuff he's always been bragging about. Same stuff he's always been capitalizing on. Give money to a few people so you can harvest much more money back from the masses because the masses are hoping to be one of those few people. It's classic capitalism here. Honestly, I don't have a problem with it. Just own what you're doing. As the interview wraps up, Jimmy says, there were definitely a couple questions you asked me that I was uncomfortable about, but that's got to be a joke, right? Because the real questions that would have made him uncomfortable would have been something like, right after he said trying to dig up the footage and don't have the footage. Oh, cool. Then why did your team delete multiple instances of that footage you just said you're trying to find and don't have right after the controversy started? That's a question that would have made him squirm a little bit and be uncomfortable. It all winds down with this big thing about how I'm not perfect. There are real things to criticize me for, but those aren't the things he chose to talk about. He chose to focus mostly on a bunch of things that don't matter, because actually digging into the stuff that does impedes his ability to sweep them under the rug, which is precisely what is happening. Successfully, I might add, which is an obvious thing to do and an obvious outcome given how the narrative blew up and how polluted it got afterwards. There's a final phone call where they briefly address the poster on the wall, the controversial artwork, but his whole explanation of we had a ton of anime posters doesn't really hit the ear very well because in that footage, I'm pretty sure that's the only thing on the entire living room wall. So yeah, maybe they've got stuff elsewhere, but this just feels like more distancing. Jimmy says he felt like Oompaville went easy on Dogpack when they spoke, yada yada, but that's just who Oompaville is. He's an easygoing guy. He doesn't go for the throat like that, and that's the reason Jimmy spoke to him. Like, what? Dude, what? The last thing, the final shot taken on the ending phone call, was about crypto, and it's a good one. It's almost like Oompaville woke up and realized, damn, I just let him have an unchecked PR platform yesterday, and he didn't really answer anything properly, except for two things, and threw down some real questions. So props to him, kudos to him. This final phone call was really good. Turns out Jimmy's entire explanation of I had nothing to do with crypto, go figure, was bullshit. He did command where the fund invested, this time desperately trying to distance himself again from that by saying he doesn't know anything about crypto punks. But the fact is, he has whatever level of control over the crypto investments that he wants to have. He ordered them to invest in something, and they did. That's called controlling the fund, bro. He squirmed when asked about a tweet regarding a crypto token called Super, and the whole thing wrapped up with him just dodging as hard as possible. The charity auction question was the pinnacle, distancing, downplaying, and avoiding, to be expected, but he just floundered when the crypto stuff came up, contradicting himself openly and really proving that if Mrbeast went to CoffeeZilla for an interview, he'd get annihilated. Ultimately, he said, to be honest, or being completely honest, like I think 50 or 60 times, he made two valid points, one of which was backed up very, very well, by the way, and properly explained, while the rest was just a PR stunt with limited value and low credibility. He spent his time wisely dodging certain topics and was never asked some of the more incriminating and point-blank questions to which there is no good answer because he's being deceptive. And he came out of this having probably moved the needle slightly in his favor, maybe. But hopefully the wider audience can see through this thin veneer of authenticity, I'll call it, in favor of the calculated reputation rehab focused person that was really sitting there on camera, attempting to come across as far removed from any serious wrongdoing and doing a decent job of it. I don't know. Once you see through it, you can't unring the bell. So once you see through it, you see all of it. But if you don't see through it, then yeah, I don't know. Maybe it looked genuine. Maybe it looked like he was being legit. I don't know. I was incredibly disappointed by the answers, and I hope someone manages to get more out of him, but it probably won't happen. He could legitimately just hunker down and move on from this right now, especially because the third party investigation that was done is the necessary step to rekindling the confidence of big brands. Like it or not, what he did with hiring that law firm and having it be like outside the company, third party, like the way he did it is actually the correct way to rehab himself for the charity stuff or for sponsorships, right? Like it will work. But yeah, that's only after the internet and all the regular people lose interest, which is basically happening right now. I'd say he's fully past the entire thing inside of 2 months, maybe even one, unless he sues. If he does that, the rest of us will have free content for the next year. If he sues, I mean, it's open season, man. So I don't think he will, but we'll see. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal, locals and Patreon, new website, merchandise, and more. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, especially concerning Jimmy, and have a nice night.